Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. I'd love to know. And if you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, let's jump in. The year was 2057, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for 2 decades, not as full members, but as observers, witnesses to the machinations of hundreds of alien species. Earth had an embassy on Century Prime, where all the major races gathered to discuss the fate of the galaxy. Jack Thompson, Earth's ambassador, walked down the grand hallway of the council chambers, straightening his blue diplomatic uniform. The ceiling above him soared, hundreds of feet high, and creatures from over 300 different worlds moved past, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. Some were covered in scales, others had too many limbs to count, and a few looked like shimmering crystals, their forms almost translucent. "Big day today," said Maria Foster, Jack's assistant. She handed him a data tablet, her voice steady but carrying a weight of concern. The trade agreement with the Carians was up for review, and it was crucial to the future of Earth's expanding colonies. Jack nodded, his mind already turning to the negotiations ahead. At 53, he had served as Earth's ambassador for 5 years, and while the scale of galactic politics still amazed him, he had learned to take it all in stride. "Let's hope it goes smoothly," he thought, as they entered the main council chamber. The chamber was enormous, curved in a half circle, with thousands of seats that seemed to stretch endlessly. At the center, on raised platforms, sat the most powerful council members: the reptilian draconians, the insect-like Vesperi, and the crystalline Lumidians. These were the species whose votes mattered most, whose words shaped the future of entire worlds. Session 4526 of the Galactic Council is now in progress, announced the Draconian chairperson, Supreme Counselor Zath, his voice booming through the chamber. He gave a slow nod as the first agenda item was introduced. It was a status report from Enforcement Fleet Delta. Jack's heart skipped a beat as the massive view screen flickered to life, showing a fleet of warships surrounding a single vessel. His breath caught in his throat. "That's the New Horizon," he whispered. The colony ship that was carrying 50,000 human lives to the TACDI system. His hands trembled slightly as he stared at the screen. "This is Enforcement Fleet Commander Vesperi," came a cold voice from the screen. The Vespari, a species with shimmering blue exoskeletons, spoke calmly. "We have intercepted the human vessel New Horizon in restricted space. They have failed to respond to warnings requesting permission to proceed with regulatory action." Jack stood up abruptly. "There must be a mistake," he called out, his voice rising above the hushed murmurs of the chamber. "That area is in our approved settlement zone. You can't just—" His words were lost in the vast room as the council members continued their discussions. The hum of conversation filled the air, indifferent to Jack's growing desperation. Zath, the Supreme Counselor, nodded slowly. "The Council has previously voted on the matter of expansion violations," he said coldly. "Proceed with the standard response." Jack's heart sank as the enforcement fleet's ships took position around the New Horizon. The massive vessels powered up their energy weapons, the blue glow lighting up the dark expanse of space. "No," Maria whispered, her face pale as she turned away from the screen. Before Jack could even react, the weapons fired. Beams of energy ripped through the New Horizon, cutting through its hull with terrifying precision. Explosions bloomed across the ship's surface. Jack felt a wave of nausea wash over him as he watched the massive colony ship break apart, fragments spinning into the void. 50,000 lives gone in an instant. The chamber fell silent. Jack's mind raced, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of what he had just witnessed. He could still hear the screams of the crew and families, the voices of those who would never see their home again. But around him, the council members simply continued their discussions as if nothing significant had happened. Their cold, emotionless faces betrayed no sign of the horror unfolding in the universe. The regulatory action has been completed, the Vespari commander said, his tone matter of fact. The zone is now secured. Jack felt his legs buckle beneath him, but he managed to hold himself upright. His gaze fixed on the view screen, now showing only the debris field where the New Horizon had once been. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the wreckage. This wasn't just a mistake. This was deliberate. His chest tightened with grief and rage. "This is murder," Jack shouted, his voice cracking as he turned to face the council. Those were civilians, families, scientists, children. Several council representatives turned their heads at his outburst, but there was no sympathy in their eyes. "Ambassador Thompson," Zath's cold voice rang out. "The human delegation would do well to remember its place as observers. The restricted zone was clearly marked on all official navigation charts. The enforcement was lawful and necessary." Jack's fists clenched. "That's a lie," he yelled, his voice trembling with fury. "We were given approval for that route. You—" "Enough," Zath interrupted, his voice like a whip. "The matter is closed. The Council has voted to classify this as regulatory enforcement. The decision stands." Two draconian security officers approached the human delegation, their eyes cold as stone. Jack felt a surge of anger, but there was nothing he could do. He was powerless here. As they were escorted out of the chamber, Jack glanced back at the screen one last time. The wreckage of the New Horizon was still there, a reminder of the cold indifference of the Council. As they were ushered through the hallways, Maria's face was pale with shock. "This isn't over," Jack whispered, his voice low but filled with determination. "Earth will not stand for this." The news reached Earth 6 hours later. President Samantha Wilson sat in the Oval Office, her face pale as she watched the recording for the third time. The destruction of the New Horizon played out on the screen before her eyes, and each time the images hit her like a slap to the face. She forced herself to watch it again, focusing on the moment when 50,000 lives were wiped out in an instant. "Madam President," General Scott Porter said, his voice calm but grave, "we need to make a decision about our response." The room was filled with grim-faced advisors. The Secretary of State wept quietly in the corner. "First, we mourn," President Wilson said, her voice steady despite the tears pooling in her eyes. "Then, we respond." The following hour was spent in heated discussions, but one thing became clear. Earth would not let this go. Jack Thompson's words, the screams of those who had died, and the cold disregard shown by the Council fueled a growing fire inside the heart of humanity. Something had to be done. In that moment, President Wilson stood before the camera in the White House, addressing the nation and the world. Her words would go down in history as the beginning of something far bigger than any one nation or any one species. But humanity had already been pushed too far. Today, humanity has suffered an unforgivable loss, she began, her voice unwavering. The Galactic Council has murdered 50,000 of our citizens. Families, children, scientists, dreamers, all gone in an act of deliberate cruelty. Across the planet, people gathered in homes, in bars, in town squares. They watched in silence as the president played edited footage of the attack. Many collapsed in grief. Others stood in silent rage, their hands clenched into fists. They knew this was only the beginning. Those responsible must pay. President Wilson continued, her voice growing more resolute. And Earth will ensure that they do. The world watched as humanity, once a humble observer, began to stir, its anger and grief transforming into resolve. The Galactic Council had made a grave mistake, and now Earth would make sure they understood the full cost of underestimating humanity's determination. As the broadcast ended, people across Earth, from New York to Jakarta, from London to Rio de Janeiro, looked up at the stars with one thought in mind. Justice would come. The response from Earth was swift and powerful, like the sudden storm that brews on the horizon before it unleashes its fury. Within hours of President Wilson's address, the United Nations convened a special session where diplomats, military officers, and intelligence leaders huddled together in tight, urgent discussions. The tragedy of the new horizon was no longer just a loss of life. It was a challenge to Earth's sovereignty and its place in the galaxy. For the first time in decades, the world's nations were united in their resolve, regardless of borders, ideologies, or differences. "We cannot let this go unanswered," General Scott Porter said as he stood before the council. The room was thick with tension. Every member knew this wasn't just a diplomatic crisis. It was an existential one. If Earth let the Galactic Council go unpunished, it would signal to every other species that humanity could be bullied and silenced, that Earth would stand by while its people were murdered in cold blood. We have to strike back, not just with words, but with power. The military advisors exchanged grim glances. The might of the Galactic Council's forces was far superior to anything Earth had at its disposal, but General Porter's words weren't about taking on the Council head-to-head. That would be suicide. Earth had to fight with what it had: its willpower, its ingenuity, and its knowledge of the Council's weaknesses. The room fell silent as President Wilson weighed the options before her. "I agree," she said after a moment, her voice steady. "But we must do this carefully. The world needs time to prepare. A direct military strike is not an option. Not yet. We'll need to use everything at our disposal, every piece of evidence, every ally we can find, and every bit of technology we've developed. But we'll need to move quickly before the Council can retaliate. This will be the moment we either step into the light or fall into darkness." The Council members nodded in agreement, their eyes now shining with a new purpose. In the back of the room, a team of engineers and scientists, who had been working quietly for years, began to lay out their plans. This was their moment, too. Humanity's greatest minds had been reverse engineering alien technology for years, studying weapons, shields, and faster-than-light travel systems. Earth didn't have the power of the Galactic Council's fleets, but it had something else: an ability to adapt, to innovate, and to surprise. Over the next few days, Earth's most secretive military installations and research labs went into overdrive. Satellites were repositioned, weapon systems upgraded, and covert operations began to take shape. The new fleet, consisting of cutting-edge ships that combined human and alien technology, was already in the final stages of construction. These ships wouldn't be ready for combat just yet, but they would serve a critical purpose in the coming days. The world was preparing for something big, something that would shake the very foundations of the Galactic Council. Meanwhile, the investigations into the Council's betrayal were growing deeper, led by Ambassador Jack Thompson and Commander Olivia Martinez. Jack, driven by grief and anger, had vowed to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. For him, this was personal. The destruction of the New Horizon wasn't just a diplomatic failure. It was the cold, calculated murder of families, of innocent people who had nothing to do with the power struggles of the galaxy. Jack had learned quickly that the destruction of the New Horizon was no accident. It was part of a larger scheme, a plot to stifle Earth's growth and prevent humanity from challenging the power dynamics within the Galactic Council. The Draconians, Vespari, and Lumidians had been consolidating power for centuries, keeping weaker species under their control. And Earth, with its rapid expansion and increasingly vocal demands for equal representation, had become a threat to that power. Olivia had spent the past week poring over every piece of data she could find, tracking the movements of the Council ships, analyzing the patterns in the restricted space zones, and cross-referencing the coordinates that had been given to Earth's navigators. She had a sinking feeling in her gut. The zone the New Horizon had entered wasn't even marked on the charts that had been provided to Earth. They had been misled, manipulated, and deliberately set up for destruction. The Vespri, the race responsible for the enforcement of regulations, had already been in place, ready to strike. "Jack," Olivia said one evening, after days of sleepless nights, her voice filled with frustration and resolve. "We're not dealing with a mistake here. The New Horizon was deliberately led into that space. Someone in the Council made sure of that." Jack's fists clenched as the weight of her words hit him. But why? Why target civilians? Why not just stop us from expanding? Olivia didn't have an immediate answer. She stared at the data on her screen, her mind racing. "Because it's more than just stopping our growth," she said quietly. "This is about control. They can't let us become a true power in the galaxy. We were getting too close to breaking the balance they've maintained for centuries." The pieces were falling into place, and the puzzle was more complex than either of them had imagined. As Olivia continued her analysis, she uncovered a hidden message, a distress signal from the New Horizon that had been cut off just before the attack. The captain, a veteran named Sam Foster, had tried to send a warning to Earth Control. His final words haunted Olivia as she replayed them over and over. "This is New Horizon to Earth Control. We are being surrounded by Council ships. They claim we are in restricted space, but our charts show this is the approved route. The message cut off. The realization hit them both at once. The New Horizon had been set up, and someone high in the Galactic Council had orchestrated this entire operation. It wasn't just a case of poor navigation. It was a deliberate ambush. And now, Earth had to respond. Jack's next steps were clear. He knew the truth, and he couldn't let it stay hidden any longer. He began contacting key officials on Earth, sharing the data, the intercepted communications, and the evidence they had uncovered. They would need to take the fight to the Council, expose them for what they had done, and make sure that every species in the galaxy knew the truth. But that wasn't all. Jack knew that there were still more pieces to the puzzle, more conspiracies hidden within the Council's power structure. There were allies to be found and enemies to confront. The next phase of their mission would require every ounce of courage, intelligence, and strength they could muster. As the days passed, Jack and Olivia worked tirelessly to plan their next move. They knew that time was running out, and the Galactic Council would soon be aware of their investigation. They couldn't afford to make any mistakes. They were about to go to war without firing a single shot. Meanwhile, across Earth, President Wilson had made her own decisions. The mood on the planet had shifted. What had begun as grief and anger had transformed into a quiet determination. Nations that had once been divided now stood together, united under the banner of justice. Earth had suffered, but it would not bend. It would rise. It would fight for its future. The Galactic Council had made a fatal mistake in underestimating humanity. And soon, they would see the full weight of that mistake. The weeks that followed were filled with tension and preparation. Earth's leaders, now unified in their resolve, moved quickly to consolidate their power and resources. Behind closed doors, military leaders, scientists, and diplomats all worked in unison to create a plan that would not only expose the Galactic Council's crimes, but also secure Earth's place in the galaxy. Every move had to be calculated, every ally carefully chosen. Earth's strength was no longer just in its people, but in its growing network of allies. Jack Thompson and Olivia Martinez, working tirelessly with their teams, continued to dig into the depths of the Galactic Council's operations. They soon uncovered more disturbing facts. Earth wasn't the only species the Council had targeted. A growing list of smaller species had suffered similar regulatory enforcement actions, all of them blamed for navigational errors, all of them punished for challenging the Council's authority. But Earth was the first species to fight back, the first to demand justice, and that made them a dangerous precedent. Olivia spent hours combing through intercepted transmissions and classified files, slowly piecing together the full scope of the conspiracy. Every discovery seemed to reveal more corruption, more lies, and more manipulation. The Council had made a grave error in believing that Earth's people were too naive to understand their deceit. Olivia, driven by the memory of the lost lives aboard the New Horizon, was relentless. But there was still one thing they hadn't yet figured out: why the Draconians, Vesperi, and Lumidians were so eager to destroy Earth's fledgling expansion. One evening, as Jack was reviewing the last batch of encrypted files that had come through, Olivia walked in with a piece of new information. "We've got something big," she said, her voice tight with urgency. Jack raised an eyebrow and leaned forward. "We've been looking at this from the wrong angle," Olivia said, pacing across the room. "The Council's actions. It's not just about preventing Earth from expanding. It's more about control over resources. Specifically, there's something in the TACDI system, a mineral we've been overlooking." Jack's interest piqued. "What kind of mineral?" "Xanthium," Olivia replied, her voice steady despite the shock in her eyes. "It's a rare element used in advanced energy systems. Only a few species have it, and it's incredibly valuable. We found traces of it in the TACDI system, and the Draconians have been illegally mining it, under the Council's radar. The New Horizon was heading right into that region of space, which means the Council wanted to eliminate any potential competition for Xanthium." Jack's face hardened, So the destruction of the New Horizon wasn't just a statement. It was a way to control Earth's access to this resource, too. Olivia nodded grimly. Exactly. They made sure we wouldn't discover the mineral deposits or have any claim to them. They've been hiding it from us, hiding it from everyone, because if Earth ever gained access to it, it would change the balance of power in the galaxy. We wouldn't just be an observer species anymore. The realization hit Jack like a punch to the gut. The Galactic Council, the supposed governing body of peace and diplomacy, wasn't interested in maintaining order. It was interested in control. And they would stop at nothing to maintain that control, even if it meant erasing entire colonies and silencing any species that dared challenge them. This has to be exposed, Jack said, his voice shaking with the fury of a man who had seen too many lives lost for the sake of power. We can't just fight the Council. We need to destroy the system they've built. We need to expose every illegal operation, every shady deal, every piece of evidence we've uncovered. The galaxy deserves to know what they've done. Olivia agreed, her eyes burning with the same intensity. We can't do it alone, though. We'll need to rally the other species that have been victimized by the Council. Those who haven't spoken out yet, who've been too afraid. If we're going to change things, we need the galaxy's support. The next few days were spent in frantic preparation. Jack reached out to a few sympathetic ambassadors on Centauri Prime, while Olivia worked with military strategists to develop a detailed infiltration plan. They knew the risks involved. The Council was powerful, its forces vast, and its reach long. If they were going to succeed, they would need to move in the shadows, avoiding direct conflict while gathering the evidence needed to bring the Council down. Jack's contacts on Centauri Prime were cautious, but agreed to help. A few, like Ambassador Sorelli, a representative from the peaceful Elandri, had quietly supported Earth's cause behind the scenes. Sorelli had been one of the few Council members to speak out against the Council's treatment of Earth, and she had been gathering her own evidence of the Council's corruption. She was also in a position to help them access the highest levels of the Council's secret archives. There's a ceremony tomorrow, Sorelli told Jack over a secure line. The Draconians will be absent from their posts for 6 hours. That's your window. We can get you into the archives then, but after that, security will be tighter than ever. Jack thanked her, feeling a sense of urgency. If they were going to uncover the truth, it had to be now. Meanwhile, back on Earth, the public's anger was growing. The president's speeches, the protests, the constant media coverage, everything was building to a breaking point. The world had watched as 50,000 lives were erased in an instant. The death toll had become a rallying cry, a symbol of the injustice humanity had suffered. People were ready for action, and President Wilson knew the time for diplomacy was drawing to a close. We've tried to play by their rules, she said in a closed-door meeting with her top military commanders. We've given them every chance to rectify their mistakes, but the Council's response was clear. Now, we must act, and we must do it in a way they will never forget. She turned to General Porter, who had been spearheading the creation of Earth's new fleet. Are we ready? Porter nodded. Our ships are ready to deploy at a moment's notice, Madam President, and we've managed to get the communication grid set up. It's not perfect, but it's secure enough to transmit to every world in Council space once we're in position. The decision had been made. Earth would fight back, not with the full might of its military just yet, but with a message, a declaration that no one would be able to ignore. The transmission would reveal the truth, broadcasting the evidence of the Council's crimes across the galaxy. The entire galaxy would know what the Council had done, and no amount of power or influence could stop it. As the days passed, Olivia and her team infiltrated Centauri Prime with the help of Sorelli's inside information. They moved in the shadows, careful not to attract attention. Their mission was clear: get the evidence, get out, and broadcast it to the entire galaxy. They couldn't afford mistakes. "We have one shot at this," Olivia said to her team as they prepared for their final push. "Once we're in the archives, there's no going back. We need to make sure we leave with everything we came for. We expose them for all to see." The team moved through the streets of Centauri Prime, their faces hidden behind carefully crafted disguises. The city was a marvel of alien architecture, towering crystalline structures glowing under the light of 3 suns. But beneath the beauty of the city, there was an oppressive weight of secrecy and power. The Galactic Council's grip on the planet, on the galaxy, was suffocating. As they made their way to the central archives, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The air seemed thick with tension, and the once vibrant city felt like a trap closing in around them. They had come this far, but now everything depended on what would happen next. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest as they neared the central archives. The air felt heavy with the weight of their mission, and every step seemed to echo in the silence of the alien city. The streets were quieter now, as expected, with most of the draconian officials attending their religious ceremony. But that meant their time was limited. They had a narrow window to infiltrate the archives, extract the evidence, and broadcast the truth. Any misstep, and they could be caught. Any slip of the hand, and the galaxy might never know what had really happened. Sorelli, their trusted contact, had guided them through the city's underground network of tunnels, leading them toward the archives. Her knowledge of the city was invaluable, and her calm demeanor steadied their nerves. As they moved through the darkened corridors, the soft hum of alien machinery filled the air, adding to the tension. "We're almost there," Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible. Kate Murphy, their tech expert, walked a few paces ahead, constantly scanning the environment for security systems. "I've got the access codes," she said, "but we'll need to bypass their surveillance grid. It's sophisticated. We'll need to be quick." Olivia nodded, her eyes darting between the team members. "Stay focused. We've come this far. There's no turning back." They reached a massive steel door, adorned with alien symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. This was it. Beyond this door lay the evidence they needed to expose the Galactic Council's corruption. Kate pulled a small device from her pack and went to work, her fingers flying over the alien interface. "Give me a minute," she muttered under her breath, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I need to bypass their firewall." Time seemed to stretch endlessly as they waited, the muffled sound of footsteps in the distance signaling that they were running out of time. Olivia kept her eyes trained on the hall behind them, her pulse quickening. If anyone discovered them now, it would be the end of their mission. Finally, Kate let out a relieved breath. "We're in." The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a vast, dimly lit chamber filled with rows upon rows of alien data terminals. Each terminal held decades of information, classified files, military reports, secret council meetings, and damning evidence of their illegal operations. Kate moved swiftly, inserting a data crystal into one of the terminals. The screens flickered to life, displaying encrypted files from the highest levels of the Galactic Council. I'm in. Let's get this evidence and go. Olivia stepped forward, scanning the room. Start downloading everything you can. We need to take it all. Minutes passed, like hours. Kate's fingers danced over the interface, pulling files and documents at an alarming rate. But then, the silence of the archives was shattered by a sudden, alarming sound. The unmistakable clang of footsteps approaching. "We've got company," Paul Garcia, their security expert, said urgently, his voice tense. Olivia's mind raced. "We don't have time for a fight. We need to move. Now!" Kate's face was pale as she stared at the progress bar on her screen. Almost done. Just a little longer. But it wasn't enough. The door to the chamber slammed open, and a squad of draconian guards stormed inside, their weapons drawn. Olivia didn't hesitate. She lunged toward Kate, pushing her away from the terminal just as a blast of energy hit the far wall. Sparks flew, and smoke billowed up from the scorched surface. "Get the data," Olivia shouted. Kate grabbed the data crystal, her face set in determination. But as she turned to run, a draconian guard swung a heavy fist toward her. Olivia intercepted the blow, ducking under it and striking the guard in a move designed to disable. But more were coming. "Go!" Olivia yelled, shoving Kate toward the exit. "I'll hold them off." Paul and Lisa followed close behind, already moving toward the exit. Olivia spun, kicking another guard to the ground. She didn't have time to think. The only thing that mattered now was getting the data to safety. The team bolted down the corridor, their footsteps echoing loudly in the metal hallways. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest as they reached the service exit, only to find it blocked by a squad of security officers. There was no way out. They were trapped. "Plan B," Paul said, his voice grim. "We fight our way out." Kate, clutching the precious data crystal, turned to Olivia. "What now?" Olivia's eyes narrowed. "We don't have a choice. We fight and make sure this gets out, no matter what." As the Draconians advanced, Olivia activated a hidden device on her wrist. The room was instantly flooded with smoke, thick and dense, obscuring their attackers' vision. It was their only chance. They moved fast, ducking and weaving through the chaos, taking down the guards as they went. The tension was suffocating, but they pressed on. "Kate, Paul, Lisa, get to the rendezvous point," Olivia commanded, her voice cutting through the noise. The team broke into two groups. Kate, Paul, and Lisa took one path, while Olivia remained behind to cover their escape. She fought with the precision of someone who had nothing left to lose. Blow after blow landed, but she never stopped moving. The Draconians were powerful, but Olivia had something they didn't: the will to fight for the truth, for the people who had lost their lives because of the Council's greed. Minutes later, they were free, at least for now. Olivia caught up with the others at their rendezvous point, a hidden basement beneath an Elandari restaurant. Sorelli was waiting for them, her translucent skin barely visible in the dim light. "We've got the data," Kate said, breathless. "Now, we need to broadcast it to the galaxy. But just as they thought they were safe, a new message came through on their secure communications line. It was from Jack. "Get to the broadcasting facility now. It's our only chance. The Council's emergency session is about to begin." Olivia's pulse quickened. The time had come. They had the truth, and now it was time to show it to the galaxy. They wouldn't stop until the Council was exposed for all to see. With their disguises barely holding up under the pressure, they moved once more through the streets of Centauri Prime, heading toward the heart of the Galactic Council's operations. The facility was heavily guarded, but Olivia knew they could get in. They had to. The fate of Earth and the truth of the Galactic Council's corruption rested on this moment. They reached the broadcasting hub, hidden beneath the Council chamber, and made their way through maintenance tunnels, bypassing security checkpoints. When they reached the control room, the final obstacle stood before them, a heavily guarded entrance leading to the central broadcasting terminal. "Get ready," Olivia whispered. "This is it." Inside the room, the council session was in full swing. Supreme Counselor Zath was speaking, his voice booming across the chamber, unaware that the fate of his rule was about to be sealed. Olivia's hand tightened around her weapon as they prepared to make their move. This was humanity's final stand against the corrupt elite of the galaxy. Their fight for justice would soon reach every corner of the universe. And as the data crystal was inserted into the terminal, the evidence began to broadcast across the galaxy to every council world, every species, and every citizen. The truth was out. The council's lies were exposed for all to see. And at that moment, humanity's battle for justice was no longer just Earth's fight. It was a fight for the future of every species that had been oppressed, lied to, or silenced by the Galactic Council. The galaxy would never be the same. The tides of power were shifting. But one thing was certain: Earth had just begun its rise.